Picture this. You're on a night flight to Miami. The cabin is quiet as passengers doze or read, looking forward to Florida sunshine. In the cockpit, 3 experienced pilots guide a magnificent new aircraft smoothly through the night sky. Then something small goes wrong. Just a tiny light bulb burns out. This was a minor technical issue, a burnt-out light bulb worth 12 cents, and it led to the destruction of a $25 million aircraft, and it claimed 101 lives. So stow your tray tables, fasten your seatbelts, and prepare for extreme turbulence, because this is Final Boarding Call. Hello, and welcome to Final Boarding Call. I am your disaster-obsessed host, Alice.
And I am Zach, a reluctant homebody husband who is becoming more and more of a homebody every day. When I look at the world outside, I think, no thanks.
Oh my gosh. This podcast probably is not helping.
Well, I told you what Simon said when he was listening to it. He said, it turns out this is not a bedtime podcast.
Oh my gosh. Did he listen to it right before bed?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Simon, no.
Yeah.
Okay, well.
Shout out to the night terror. Terrible night.
Yes. Simon is a drifter buddy of ours.
And he will hear this shout out at some point. He will.
He's awesome. We appreciate the listen. Yes, this is probably not a great bedtime podcast, but very fun for road trips. Or if you're really freaky, listening to it in the plane, which is usually how I re-listen to our episodes, usually in a plane.
Stop being on planes so damn much and you couldn't.
It's literally half of my life. Zach and I were actually in Disney recently, and we had a great time. It was super duper fun. And to celebrate our wonderful Disney trip, our next episode is a roller coaster disaster. So stay tuned to that. I didn't quite have time to finish it for this recording because we just got back from Disney, but
some Final Destination stuff.
Oh man, like roller coasters gone so wrong. Okay, before we dive in, a quick reminder to our listeners, what should they do, Zach?
They should rate and subscribe wherever they get their podcasts.
Hell yeah, brother. Yep.
I guess listen, rate, review wherever they get their podcasts.
Yeah, rate, review, subscribe, tell a friend.
Yeah.
We're not picky.
Okay. Well, I don't mean to burst your bubble, but I know this story.
No, are you kidding?
I do, yeah. I don't remember.
How do you know this?
I mean, it was something with you.
Did I ruin my own podcast?
You probably did.
Did I make you listen to somebody else covering this story?
Is that it was a podcast that somebody else did, wasn't it?
I'm sure it was. Was it a My Favorite Murder?
I don't know. Okay. I don't remember. I mean, it's been a while.
And I did make you listen to it. But you know what? You probably don't remember the details.
I never do.
Okay, so we're going to do this damn thing. Sources, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, gotta list the sources. So
standardplanecrashplace.com.
Season 5, episode 9 of Air Disasters, titled Fatal Distraction. Great episode. Also, I need to figure out how he pronounces this. Is it Mentour pilot? Mentour pilot? He's definitely from Europe because he has an accent in his videos, but he does an episode on YouTube of this called What Caused the Everglades Disaster. His videos are really incredible. They are similar to our podcast, but it's just him, so less fun banter, and he also is a pilot, so probably more factual than our podcast. Okay. And lastly, the podcast My Favorite Murder, episode 500, did feature this case as well. All right, Zach, I'm taking you back in time. December 29th, 1972. Disco, poppin', the mustaches, they're hairy. The pants are tight except for the bottoms where they were huge. It's 1972.
Parachute pants style.
Not like bell bottoms, but like extreme elastic bell bottoms, spandex bell bottoms.
Spanx.
Yeah, showing off everything. Okay.
Camel tail.
Now, December 29th is a very busy time for travel.
People are going home from Christmas.
Oy vey. It's like a nightmare to be in the airport between Christmas and New Year's. It's the worst. Across America, airports were crowded with travelers heading home or escaping for warmer climates during the winter. Zach's enjoying a beer. At New York's JFK Airport, Eastern Airlines Flight 401 was preparing for its routine trip to Miami. But there was nothing routine about this aircraft. Flight 401 was assigned a Lockheed L-1011 TriStar. This was a massive, cutting-edge jetliner that had only been in commercial service for under a year. This thing is brand spanking new.
Only had a couple of million people inside it.
Yes, the L-1011 was America's answer to the European Airbus and the Boeing 747. With its distinctive third engine mounted in the tail and its spacious cabin that could seat up to, get this, Zach, 400 passengers.
It's a lot of people.
She a big girl. The TriStar represented the pinnacle of aviation technology for its time. Eastern's particular plane, tail number N310EA, was practically brand new. It was delivered to the airline only 4 months earlier. It probably still smelled good, which is crazy.
Not like baby vomit.
No, oh God. To understand how advanced the aircraft was, consider that many airliners from the 1960s still had analog instruments and required navigators for transoceanic flights. It's a fun word to say. The L-1011, by contrast, featured computerized flight management systems, automated navigation, and the world's most sophisticated autopilot ever in that time period. We've gotten more sophisticated, but in 1972, this was like cutting edge. The flight crew for that flight consisted of 3 highly experienced pilots. In command was Captain Robert Bob Luft. So we'll call him Bob.
Boberson.
I mean, thank God I finally picked an episode that had names that I could easily pronounce. I was struggling there for a while. So we got Bob, right? Let me tell you about Bob. He's 55 years old. He is a veteran pilot with almost 30,000 flight hours.
It's a lot of flight hours.
That's so many flight hours.
I think that's the highest number that we've heard so far.
I think it is as well. Our listeners can fact check us, but I think 30,000 is the highest we've had. This is equivalent to spending over 3 continuous years in the air, just flying nonstop for 3 straight years.
Nope.
Though the TriStar was relatively new to Eastern's fleet, Loft had already, I'm going to call him Bob instead. Bob had already logged about 280 hours flying it. He had been with Eastern for more than 30 years and was known as a competent, no-nonsense pilot.
So he didn't like to party?
You know, I probably would have gotten along with him, if I'm being honest.
He was a rule-following guy.
His first officer was Albert Stockstill, a 39-year-old with 5,800 total flight hours and 306 hours on the TriStar specifically. And then flight engineer Donald Repo, 51. He rounded out the crew with over 15,700 hours of flying experience, including 53 hours on the L-1011. The 3 men formed what should have been an ideal team to handle any situation that might arise. Together, they had nearly 52,000 hours of flight experience, almost 6 years of continuous flight. The passengers filing onto Flight 401 that evening were a cross-section of America. We're talking families doing Christmas trips, tourists heading to Florida's beaches, and business travelers. My mom, sister, and I would fly right after Christmas or right before Christmas to my Nana's house in Florida. Not Miami, Daytona Beach area, but
Them retired folks.
okay. Among them was an off-duty Eastern Airlines maintenance expert named Angelo Donadio, who was catching a ride back to Miami. The flight was also carrying newlyweds, Ron and Lily Infantino, who had been married for only 20 days. And they had just spent Christmas with Ron's family. As all of them settled into their seats, they had no reason to think that this flight would be any different from countless others that they'd taken before. The weather in Miami that evening was perfect. Clear skies, very light wind, temperatures in the low 70s. As our Captain Bob guided the aircraft away from JFK's terminal, he probably knew that it was going to be an easy flight. The route from New York to Miami was one of Eastern Airlines' very common routes, one they had done thousands of times, and the weather conditions were ideal. During the flight, the pilots used the TriStar's autopilot, which was revolutionary for its time. To understand how significant this was, remember that in 1972, most home appliances did not even have digital displays. But this aircraft could fly itself.
It's a big deal.
It's pretty cool.
Dad was just at home drunk. Mom was cooking in the kitchen. Redacted.
Redacted. The initial part of the flight was completely uneventful. Passengers watched the in-flight movie, which that to me is even crazier that this plane had.
They had in-flight movies back then.
That's wild to me. Autopilot, I'm like, in-flight movie in 1972? Crazy. Did I wake up the baby?
No, but I swear I heard her yell, Mama.
Okay, I'm going to take the decibels down just a little bit. We're going to get a little more ASMR.
Quit yelling.
Sorry, I just got really excited about in-flight movies. They watched the in-flight movie, they enjoyed their meal service, or they just relaxed, right? In the cockpit, the crew began preparing for their approach to Miami. First Officer Stockstill was handling the flying duties while Captain Bob Loft monitored the instruments. And Flight Engineer Repo went through the landing checklist. As they began their descent towards the twinkling lights of Miami, none of them could have imagined that a tiny burnt-out light bulb was about to change their lives forever. Close to...
Plane was brand new.
This plane was brand new. It's really frustrating. So it's like when you buy something from the store that comes with batteries and then it dies like the next day. And you're like, are you kidding me?
Or you buy a printer and you print four times and it's out of ink.
Yeah, Zach and I, we really got a lemon of a printer recently. So if anybody has good printer suggestions, let us know.
We're not going to buy it because we just bought one, but...
Well, I don't know. I kind of hate ours. Close to midnight, the plane began its final approach to Miami International Airport. The cabin lights had been dimmed. Many of the passengers were asleep. Through the windows, they could see the sprawling city lights of Miami growing closer. In the cockpit, First Engineer Repo was methodically working through the landing checklist. Radar up, flat panels checked, gear down. That's when Captain Bob Loft noticed something unusual. The small green light on his instrument panel that should have illuminated to show that the nose landing gear was properly locked in the down position hadn't lit up. The two main landing gear indicators were showing green, but the nose gear indicator remained dark. This was concerning, but not immediately alarming. Captain Bob Loft decided to cycle the landing gear. So that means he raised it back up and he lowered it. Essentially the equivalent of
turn it off and back on.
Turn it off and turn it back on again. Yeah, exactly. Oh my goodness gracious. The sound of the landing gear mechanism echoed throughout the cabin. Some passengers noticed the grinding noise several times, but none of them vocalized concern to anyone else. It was just one of those routine issues that sometimes happens in air travel. I would for sure notice if the landing gear went up and back down again.
Me too.
Because of this podcast, I would definitely be like,
do you need me to climb underneath and make sure it's down?
That's what I'm saying. I would so volunteer for that job. Are you kidding? To go check? I'm in. Fucking in. The indicator light still did not come on. Captain Bob Loft now faced a dilemma. The nose landing gear might be properly locked down and the light might just be burnt out. Or the gear might not be secured, which would lead to a very dangerous landing. It was not a risk that he was willing to take because he is no nonsense Bob.
With a name like Bob, you know he's no nonsense.
He is no goddamn nonsense. Bob radioed the tower, and they would need to go around because they didn't have confirmation that their nose gear was locked. The tower instructed them to pull up, climb straight ahead to 2,000 feet, and contact approach control on a different frequency. Flight engineer Repo performed a test nicknamed the Christmas tree. How cute is that? It's nicknamed the Christmas tree because guess what you do?
Turn on every light.
You turn on every single light. You literally light that dash up. So he turned on every single light in the cockpit to check if all of the bulbs were still working. When they did this test, the nose gear indicator light failed to illuminate, confirming their suspicion that the bulb itself might be burnt out rather than a problem with the landing gear. So they are at 2,000 feet right now. They are circling away from the airport while they're figuring all of this out. First Officer Albert Stockstill was still flying the plane, but Captain Bob needed his help to investigate the indicator light. So Bob instructed him to engage the autopilot. Turn the autopilot on.
I'm tired of this shit. Jesus, take the wheel.
I don't want to dig anymore, Grandpa.
And it turns out that's too damn bad.
Too damn bad.
You keep digging.
Name the movie and we'll send you a sticker. The TriStar's autopilot was so sophisticated that it actually had the ability to land the plane. Yes, Zach, that's right. This thing, basically the technology of being able to like parallel park a car, that's how mind-blowing this is to me, that a plane could land itself. Crazy.
I think landing a plane is probably harder than parallel parking a car. I learned parallel parking at 16 in one attempt, and then I've done it great ever since.
Do you think you could land a plane?
I do, actually.
Yeah, I think you could too.
I would love to try.
I know.
Like, I swear to God, if they ever ask, is anybody a pilot in here? I'll be like, no, but I want to be.
So Albert programmed it to maintain an altitude of 2,000 feet while they tried to fix the indicator light. What happened next would become the textbook example, and I'm not exaggerating, it's literally in textbooks, of how a minor technical issue can escalate into catastrophe when crew coordination breaks down. This is a story about teamwork and communication, and it doesn't have a happy ending. Okay, Captain Bob asked Albert to help him remove the indicator light, but the light fixture was proving difficult to extract from the instrument panel. The two pilots struggled with the tiny light, while flight engineer Repo monitored the instruments. This is where we see a real breakdown in cockpit discipline. First Officer Albert was designated as the pilot flying for this flight, right? He's the one in charge of piloting the aircraft. Yet, here he is, trying to fix a light while simultaneously being responsible for monitoring the aircraft's flight path, which is a really important thing to do.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, flights are in the air, and if you're not paying attention, it might not be in the air anymore.
Yes, that's so true. And it's important to remember that this is 1972, and there really was no formal training for dividing responsibilities in the cockpit during
They probably couldn't even see. They had hotboxed that thing so hard with cigarette smoke. Wink.
Wink. It's actually true. I'm sure that plane is just...
You know they were reeking of smoke.
God, yes.
So it didn't smell good anymore.
No, I guess it didn't. I'd be having an asthma attack so fast it'd make your head spin.
You haven't stopped having those for a week.
That's so
or
true.
2 or 3 or 4.
Whew, at least I have my voice back. I promised the people that would happen, and it did. The concept of crew resource management, standardized procedures for how pilots should communicate and delegate tasks, but that didn't exist yet, Zach.
Because it was the early 70s.
Because it was the early 70s, and it was a goddamn free-for-all. With your mustaches. Everywhere. This accident would literally become one of the main catalysts for developing that training, which is now standard through the aviation industry. So let's hop back into this plane for a moment, where Bob and Albert are literally fighting a light bulb right now.
I don't want to be back in the plane. It's going to crash.
Well, the good news is Albert finally removes it.
Heck yeah.
Yes. However, now he can't get it back in, Zach. So Captain Bob offered some guidance, noting that Albert had it sideways.
Turn it on its side.
Folks, I'm not a pilot, and I certainly have not been in many aircrafts from the 1970s, so I'm not entirely sure what this light bulb looked like or how it went in or out, but it is concerning that they were trying to put it in sideways.
I think it just means that it's kind of like taillight bulbs where you have offset pins and they go in and then you rotate it. But instead, he was trying to put it in where the pins weren't lined up.
That makes more sense. I'm literally picturing like a tiny little Christmas tree lights, like an itty bitty little one. And I'm picturing him like putting it in
Sideways.
literally sideways. So the glass is like hitting the hole.
There's some stupid people
I'm
out there,
like-
but I'm not sure that that's what was going on.
That's concerning. Yours makes way more sense. It was turned like 90 degrees.
Yeah.
So that the pins weren't lining up. Okay. Let's go with Zach's. Meanwhile, air traffic control has instructed them to turn left, heading 300. I don't know exactly what that means because I'm not a pilot, but turn left is what I got. So make the plane go lefter than it's currently going. Captain Bob acknowledged the instruction, but his primary focus remained on the damn light bulb.
Damn it.
That light bulb. Frustrated with the continuing light problem, Bob told his flight engineer to go down and visually check if the nose wheel was actually extended, which is what I said I would absolutely volunteer to do in a heartbeat. This sounds like such a cool operation to me.
It's like driving a convertible, baby. You're getting the wind in your hair.
That's insane. That is so cool. In the LA-1011, there was a very small compartment below the cockpit floor nicknamed the Hell Hole. And it was an accent point that allowed the crew members to physically see the nose landing gear mechanism through a viewing port. As Flight Engineer Repo left his station to check the landing gear, something crucial changed in the cockpit dynamic. The crew member, whose primary responsibility was to monitor the aircraft's systems, was no longer at his post. The other 2 pilots were still preoccupied with the light bulb. Who is flying this plane? The machines.
Can't trust AI.
AI. Out in the passenger cabin, Richard Pogloski was looking out his window when he noticed something concerning. He could see a tower in the distance, and it looked like they were descending toward it. As a relatively experienced flyer, this seemed really strange to him. Pogloski had noticed something the pilots hadn't. The plane was getting closer to the ground.
It was not maintaining 2,000 feet.
Flight Engineer Repo, now in the electronics bay beneath the cockpit, reported back that he couldn't see anything because it was dark, like pitch black in there, obviously.
Take a flashlight, dummy.
He's in the hellhole. Captain Bob realized that he had forgotten to turn on the external lights, which would illuminate the landing gear. Once reminded, he activated the nose wheel light. Duh. In the Miami control tower, Controller Charlie Johnson noticed something concerning on his radar screen. Eastern Airlines Flight 401 seemed to have descended from 2,000 feet to only 900 feet. But he wasn't overly alarmed. It wasn't unusual to get false readings for several radar sweeps in a row. That's alarming.
It's not
Fact.
weird for it to multiple times say this is not good.
That's more alarming than the fact that he was not alarmed. Just saying. Johnson radioed to ask how things were coming along. Captain Bob replied that they'd like to turn around and come back in for landing. He believed that they'd soon get confirmation that the gear was locked, and he wanted to return to the airport. Johnson instructed them to turn left, heading 180. Deep in the Everglades, Bob Marcus was hunting frogs with a friend when Eastern Airlines Flight 401 roared past him overhead. We have another Bob, but this Bob is like the opposite of Captain Bob, because this Bob is straight up
Redneck.
He is hunting frogs. He is in that swamp. He is doing his thing.
He's got his high waters on him.
Inside the cockpit, a sudden realization struck the pilots. First Officer Albert noticed that something had happened to their altitude. Captain Bob Loft asked what was happening, confusion evident in his voice as he tried to make sense of their actual altitude. And those were the last words recorded on the cockpit voice recorder. 2 seconds later, at 11:42 p.m., the first sounds of impact were recorded. Eastern Airlines Flight 401 crashed into the murky waters of the Everglades at a speed of 227 miles per hour.
Jesus. I don't know if anybody's ever crashed into anything, holding water before. That is a fast decel.
What's crazy is they were going that fast because they were not prepared for any sort of landing.
Yeah.
So they had not slowed down at all. They had just run out of sky. Mm-hmm. The left wing hit first, followed by the left engine and the left main landing gear. The impact was so violent that the aircraft immediately shattered into multiple pieces, spreading debris across a 1/4 mile of swampland. In those final moments, the pilots had finally realized their perilous situation, but it was far too late to recover. The aircraft had descended from 2,000 feet to the surface of the Everglades in 4 minutes. All while the crew's attention was fixated on a problem that, in retrospect,
didn't exist.
Was so trivial. A burnt-out indicator light for a landing gear that was, in all likelihood, properly extended and locked the entire time. Now, Zach, this story is particularly interesting to me because usually with our cases, this is where it kind of ends and we pivot to like the investigation and like do. However, they landed in a swamp and crazy shit's about to go down in this swamp. So we are going to transport ourselves to the Florida Everglades. The initial impact with the swamp created a massive fireball as fuel tanks ruptured and ignited. But then something remarkable happened. The soft, waterlogged terrain of the Everglades absorbed much of the crash energy, preventing a catastrophic explosion that would have instantly killed everybody on board.
Everybody
period.
that wasn't already dead.
Correct. Instead, the aircraft broke into segments, with some sections remaining partially intact. Remarkably, 75 people survived the crash, nearly half of the people on board.
It's a dog.
Oh.
Sevy, come here. Pupping pibbles.
People that have a pit bull will get
They
it.
understand.
They understand. They are the sweetest, grossest animals on the planet.
That's so sweet.
But they're so sweet.
So sweet.
And they're so gross. Okay. All right.
And that's our story.
Yeah, he's eating, but we're just going to kind of charge forward because we got to keep going. Remarkably, 75 people survived the crash, nearly half of the people on board. However, the survivors found themselves in a nightmare. They were injured, they were disoriented, and they were stranded in a pitch black Everglade swamp.
Mm-hmm. With them gators.
With them gators. All right, let's talk about some of the passengers. Richard Progloski, the passenger who had noticed the unusual descent, regained consciousness to find himself seriously injured. Despite feeling minimal pain due to shock, he could see his torn clothes and exposed skin on his arms. He knew that he needed to stay calm, and he needed to find a way out of the swamp. Many survivors recalled the terrifying moment of impact. The sudden flash of fire that swept through the cabin, the inability to breathe as the flames consumed the oxygen, and then the darkness as they lost consciousness. Ron Infantino, who was the newlywed, was knocked unconscious by the crash. When he came to, he found himself alone in the swamp, far away from any of the survivors. He was badly wounded, and his new wife, Lily, who had been sitting next to him, was nowhere to be seen. In the darkness, he could hear the sounds of other survivors calling for help, but he couldn't move to reach them. The swamp water had doused the initial flames, but a new danger lurked. 20,000 kilograms of jet fuel had leaked into the surrounding water. The survivors were literally soaking in it, and they knew.
With open wounds.
Yes, which is really bad. Also, a single spark could ignite the fuel and kill everyone who had survived the initial crash. Hopefully all the cigarettes went out. All right, let's go back to our frog hunter. Frog hunter Bob Marcus had seen the aircraft go down and immediately sprang into action, navigating his airboat toward the plane. I know, he's so cool. He navigated his airboat toward the crash site. He jumped into the swamp to help. He immediately felt the sting of the jet fuel on his skin, which would cause burns that he would need to treat for about a week. So he's in it.
To be the hero.
I know, we love him. Bob Marcus quickly spotted a survivor who was in grave danger. A badly wounded man still strapped to his seat and on the verge of drowning in the water.
Oh, upside down chair.
Mm-hmm. The man kept pleading for help, saying that he couldn't hold his head up much longer. So my guess is that he's probably either on his side or at an angle where, his head is, he has to hold his head up to keep it from going under. Bob Marcus, pulled him up, preventing him from drowning. Throughout the night, Bob would go on to save dozens of lives, keeping many people from drowning in the murky waters of the Everglades. Now, this is 1972. Bob Marcus is unable to just whip his cell phone out and go ahead and call for help.
Instead, he's airboating these things to the shore.
Yeah, he's him and his frogs and his airboat are saving the day. Isolated from the other survivors and unable to move, Ron Infantino now had a new reason to fear for his life. Swamp puppies, also known as alligators, and snakes. So they're swamp puppies and they're nope ropes. And he can hear them and see the glow of their eyes.
Oh, hell yeah.
Hell yeah, brother. So initially they were scared by the crash.
Yeah.
However, enough time has passed now that they're like, oh, what's going on in the water? I see some thrashing. I see some people unable to move.
It's giving fear.
That was you and not me. I have not said that.
I know. I was making fun of you still, though, because you've been saying it's giving.
I've actually been really trying to not.
You've noticed how much you were doing it then?
Yes. In his injured state, he knew that he was defenseless. Then, remarkably, he heard something unexpected. Christmas caroling. Bet you didn't see that one coming.
Don't remember that detail.
To rally the survivors' spirits, flight attendant Trudy Smith and others began singing Christmas carols. They knew instinctively that rescue would not come quickly, as no one knew their exact location in the middle of the swamp at midnight.
Yeah.
The surreal scene of survivors singing Joy to the World in the dark swamp after such a devastating crash seems almost unbelievable. But it happened, which is a testament to human resilience in the face of tragedy. Or just good old-fashioned shock and desperation.
Fake it till you make it.
Amen. Within minutes of the crash, Coast Guard helicopters were sent out to search for the site. But in the pitch black night, they flew right over the wreckage without seeing it. Bob Marcus tried to signal the distant helicopters with his flashlight. Bob Marcus with his frogs.
Yeah, he's got a flashlight.
And his flashlight. He could see that they were going in the wrong direction, so he waved his light at them until he actually saw them turn back towards the crash site. Bob Marcus.
The real hero.
Less than half an hour after the crash, the Coast Guard arrived. But the nearest landing site was 100 meters away from the wreckage because they're in a swamp. Marcus got on his little airboat and he rushed over to meet the helicopters and guide the rescuers back to the crash site. Once again, Bob Marcus saving the day. Rescue worker Don Schneck, what a name. Rescue worker Don Schneck was one of the first responders on the scene. Making his way through the wreckage, he discovered Captain Bob Loft had survived the initial crash. But Bob was in bad shape with lacerations, broken ribs, and he was very clearly in shock. Despite Don Schneck's attempts to reassure him, Bob said that he knew he was going to die. Feeling inadequate as the only rescuer initially on the scene, Schneck was relieved to look back toward Miami and see a line of lights approaching as more help arrived. Thank God. First Officer Bert Stockstill was killed during the crash. Albert.
He was the one that was in the cargo area trying to look at in the hellhole, right?
No, this was Albert.
Oh, okay.
This was the one who was supposed to be flying the plane.
He did a bad job, but next. Sorry.
It's not his fault. He was told to do something. Anyway, our first officer, Albert Stockstill, was killed during the crash. And Captain Bob soon died at the scene from his injuries. Now, first engineer Repo, who was in the hellhole, he initially survived, and he was transported to a hospital, as was Angelo Donadio. By dawn, all the wounded had been transported to Miami hospitals. The final toll was devastating. 99 people lost their lives, while 77 survived with varying degrees of injury. Ron Infantino was among those fighting for survival in the hospital. When a priest came to give him last rites, he realized just how precarious his condition was. Throughout this ordeal, he continued asking if anyone had seen his wife, Lily, but in the chaotic hospital environment, no one could give him answers. The crash was headline news around the world, obviously. It was the first crash of a wide-body jumbo jet.
Ever.
And it produced the largest number of deaths in U.S. civil aviation history at that time. I mean, this is huge news. For investigators, it presented a perplexing mystery. How could the newest, most sophisticated airliner available, apparently in perfect working condition, simply fly into the ground?
While on autopilot.
Mm-hmm. The crash site itself provided important initial clues for investigators. The trail of debris was enormously long, suggesting that the plane hit the swamp almost in level flight, not in a steep, uncontrolled dive.
Yeah, they were coasting.
Its descent had clearly been slow and gradual. Beer number 2.
If I get to 10 tonight.
Nope, absolutely not. That will not happen. Its descent had clearly been slow and gradual, which was puzzling. If the pilots had lost control, the plane would likely have crashed at a much steeper angle. Mm-hmm. National Transportation Safety Board investigators documented the final settings of many instruments in the cockpit. One crucial discovery stood out. The autopilot was set to maintain an altitude of 2,000 feet. So why didn't it?
Because it's not abnormal for radar to give false readings.
Tits.
All the time.
Did that get her?
Mm-mm.
Okay, thank you. My phone fell out of my pocket.
That's why women don't have pockets. You're not responsible enough for them.
We got a sleeping baby in the next room, so we're trying to be
whispery.
She's not really a baby. She turned 3 yesterday.
She's still my baby.
It's so crazy. Investigators interviewed maintenance expert Angelo Donadio, who had survived the crash. All he could tell them was that the crew was trying to fix a light bulb before the crash, a detail that initially seemed insignificant, but would prove crucial to understand this accident. Within days, the plane's flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder, the famous
black box,
they were recovered from the wreckage. Investigators hoped that they would provide answers to this mystery. Before they could fully analyze the data, however, flight engineer Don Repo died in the hospital from his injuries. There were 3 in that cockpit, and all 3 of them did end up dying. Ron Infantino, still hospitalized, was finally given the devastating news that he had been dreading. The body of his wife, Lily, his wife of only 20 days, had been found under the plane's wing. He later described her as a wonderful person, noting that at 27 years old, she had been his first and only love. It's sad.
Only if you let it be sad.
I mean, that's so fucked. They were married for 20 days. And get this. This will make me tear up a little bit. In a cruel twist of fate, he learned that he and Lily had casually switched seats earlier during the flight when she had gotten up to use the restroom. They hadn't even thought twice about it. That simple decision had massive consequences as he was thrown clear of the aircraft during the crash while she remained trapped under the wing and drowned in the swamp.
Well, that would be a hard thing to deal with.
Zach shows and demonstrates emotions in a very unusual way. This is his sad face.
But it's also my happy face.
He just has one face. It's the only face he's got.
I mean, what am I going to say about it? It was 1972. It's 2025.
How about that is horrible? And as somebody who is married to your first and only love, you can understand the devastation.
I can't, because I haven't lost you. I can't possibly fathom what he is feeling, especially the survivor's guilt, feeling like he kind of killed his wife because he switched seats.
There you go. That's what we were looking for. There's a human. There's a human in there after all. The Everglades environment proved both a blessing and a curse for survivors. The soft waterlogged terrain had absorbed much of the crash energy, preventing a catastrophic explosion and allowing many to survive the initial impact. The thick, muddy swamp water had even clogged some of the survivors' wounds, preventing them from bleeding to death. But that same mud introduced a deadly new threat: germs.
Germies.
Yeah. Their wounds had become infected with a deadly organism found in the black mud of the Everglades. The organism produces an infection called gas gangrene. So people have heard of gangrene, and it will cause, I believe it will destroy your healthy tissue, and often you need to have parts of your body amputated.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Let me read what I actually wrote, because I did write about this, but that's what I remember it being. It's a rapidly spreading bacterial infection that will kill a person in 2 days if untreated. The bacteria thrive in environments without oxygen, and release toxins that destroy surrounding tissue. It can only be effectively treated in a hyperbaric chamber.
And you can't exactly put 70-something people in a hyperbaric chamber.
For people that don't know, that is a pressurized container filled with high levels of oxygen that forces oxygen into the wounds and will kill the bacteria that doesn't like oxygen, right? So that makes sense. The bacteria doesn't like oxygen. Give it much oxygen to kill it.
You know, most high-end hospitals have them, but it's the size of one hospital room. It is not the size of a building.
Well, I've got good news, Zach, because only 8 of the surviving passengers
Got it.
actually had it. Yes. But hyperbaric chambers did have to be found for all of them because the only alternative treatment is amputation. Ron Infantino's arm was severely infected with the gas gangrene. Doctors initially told him that they would need to amputate his arm because all of the hyperbaric chambers were already being used. So they're at Mercy Hospital, and unfortunately, they don't just have infinite chambers for people. So,
but also reality, like, you cannot just build one in a matter of minutes for these people. No. That is not a thing.
No. So the doctors are breaking the news to this guy that he is going to lose his arm. However, before the surgery begins, an unused chamber was located at a Navy base in Panama City.
Yup.
Oh, man. After spending 40 hours in the chamber, the pressurized oxygen did kill the bacteria, and it saved his arm and his life. Unreal. While doctors worked to save the survivors, investigators examined what remained of the aircraft. They meticulously tested its flight controls, its engines, the instruments, and the electrical and hydraulic systems. What they found, or rather what they did not find, was surprising. The plane was virtually new, and it was in perfect mechanical condition. No equipment failure was found that could have caused this crash. In fact, some parts of this plane were in such good condition that the NTSB gave them back to Eastern Airlines so that they could be installed in other aircraft in the fleet.
That's bad juju. Don't do that.
It is bad juju. The autopsy of Captain Bob Loft yielded a very gruesome discovery. He had a large, undetected tumor growing in his brain. It pressed into the part of his brain responsible for vision. Medical records revealed that between the ages of 50 and 52, vision in the pilot's left eye had rapidly deteriorated. Investigators initially theorized, after finding this discovery, that the captain may have had reduced peripheral vision or blind spots that prevented him from noticing critical altitude warnings. However, Captain Poploff's family and friends reported that he actually had excellent vision, and that he was even an accomplished marksman who shot doves. His recent medical exams had shown only minor vision issues that were corrected with glasses. Investigators still had not determined the most crucial question: why did Flight 401 start descending in the first place? Could the sophisticated autopilot, which was supposed to maintain 2,000 feet, have malfunctioned? The plane's autopilot computers had survived the crash, and they were removed for examination. 11 days after the crash, these same computers were installed on another L-1011 TriStar. Test pilots flew the same route as Flight 401, and the autopilot held that plane perfectly at 2,000 feet. So if the autopilot was working correctly, if Bob was able to see, what on earth had gone wrong?
It just wasn't set correctly then. It wasn't set to maintain, it was sent to land.
As investigators replayed recordings from the cockpit voice recorder, they heard something revealing. An altitude warning alarm had clearly sounded in the cockpit as the plane descended through 1,700 feet, warning the crew that they were dangerously low. How could experienced pilots miss such an important warning? The cockpit transcript provided the answer. At the exact moment that that alarm sounded, both pilots were completely absorbed with fixing the landing gear light, and flight engineer Repo was in the hellhole checking the landing gear. There was no one paying attention to hear this alarm sound. The warning chime came out of a speaker at Repo's workstation, and no one was sitting to hear it. That alarm, which is clearly audible on the cockpit voice recorder, wasn't registered in the minds of anybody on the flight deck. Not because they weren't trying to pay attention, but because their attention had become so narrowly focused on a single problem. Psychologists call this phenomenon attention tunneling, and it is a very common factor in many accidents across different industries. This is something that when I am teaching new drivers how to drive on track, I don't necessarily call it attention tunneling, but I absolutely talk about becoming hyper fixated on one thing. And that can be so dangerous. You really need to have situational awareness, right? And be able to shift your attention. Investigators also discovered that pilots had admitted placing considerable trust in the modern autopilots flying their planes. They may have become overly dependent on the technology, assuming that once the autopilot was engaged, they didn't need to worry about basic flight parameters like altitude. But they still hadn't determined the most critical piece of information. If the autopilot was working correctly, why did the plane crash into a swamp? The answer came in a dramatic form when the NTSB conducted a public hearing in Miami 2 months after the crash. Before the hearing, an Eastern Airlines pilot named Daniel Gellert wrote to the chairman of the NTSB offering to testify on his own initiative. So this guy, Daniel Gellert, had experience flying the L-1011 TriStar and had noticed some very concerning behaviors with its autopilot system. It's important to understand that the world of airline piloting in 1972 is very different than the world is today. It was considered professionally risky for a pilot to bypass his airline's chain of command and raise concerns directly with federal investigators. Airlines were far more insular than they are now, and pilots who spoke out would often face career repercussions.
Yeah, they just lose their jobs and they're done forever.
Yeah. Despite this risk, Gellert testified that during a recent flight on a TriStar, he had accidentally dropped a map on the cockpit floor. As he bent down to pick it up, he nudged his control column. He noticed immediately that the plane's autopilot had been affected. The altitude hold function had disengaged without any warning light or sound. The NTSB discovered that Gellert's experience was not unique. In fact, 17 days after the accident, Eastern Airlines had quietly posted a notice on a company bulletin board and mailed it to all of its TriStar pilots. The bulletin warned against accidentally bumping the control wheel while the autopilot was engaged. They knew, or at least they found out, this was a crucial insight. Modern airliners had pressure-sensitive switches built into their control wheels or sticks. The idea is that if a pilot needs to take control quickly, they shouldn't need to waste precious seconds looking for the autopilot disconnect button on the instrument panel. Instead, they can apply firm pressure to the controls. The autopilot will automatically disengage. It's a sensible safety feature, right? We talked about this in the Aeroflot
It makes sense
episode.
to me, but
Yes.
also not like a bump. It needs to be like a wonk.
Yes. So in the Aeroflot episode, right, it was 30 seconds of continuous pressure. This is obviously much more dramatic because it's like bumping it and it's like, oh, okay, I get it.
guess I'm done.
I'm done. I'm off. However, again, like Aeroflot, the pilots didn't know. The pilots didn't know.
Pilots gotta know.
The flight data recorder revealed the precise moments that Flight 401 began to descend. 11:37 p.m. By studying the cockpit voice recorder transcript, investigators could determine exactly what was happening in the cockpit at that moment. So Captain Bob was turning in his seat to speak to flight engineer Repo, telling him to go down and check whether the nose wheel was properly extended. The investigators concluded that as Captain Bob turned in his seat, he had inadvertently bumped his control wheel, and it had enough pressure to disengage the altitude hold function of the autopilot without anyone noticing. This simple unconscious nudge had started a gradual descent that would continue unchecked for over 4 minutes. On a dark, moonless night over the featureless Everglades, the pilots had no visual reference to alert them if they were descending. The aircraft's descent was so gradual, only 200 feet per minute. Without instruments, it was imperceptible. A training director for Eastern Airlines eventually revealed that before the Everglades crash, pilots were never taught about the disengage function of the autopilot. The L-1011's autopilot used an altitude hold disconnect feature that was far more sensitive than other aircraft. Worse, when it disengaged, there was no audible warning. Only a small visual indicator. You'd think that we would have learned our lesson with that one, but we didn't. The NTSB reached a sobering conclusion. The crash was due to pilot error, but a very specific kind. The crew became so distracted by a minor mechanical problem that they failed to notice that their aircraft was gradually descending towards the ground. They misunderstood the nuances of this sophisticated autopilot system, and they hadn't been properly trained on its potential pitfalls. Okay, so this is really kind of one of the saddest parts of this story, because this whole thing was about the nose gear, right? The nose gear indicator light.
And it was fine the whole time.
It was fine the whole time. The investigators looked into it, and it was locked and loaded and ready to land. It was perfectly fine. It literally was a burnt-out light bulb. A piece of the plane that failed was worth 12 cents. That small failure only became catastrophic because of how the humans responded to it. Eastern Airlines Flight 401 became a pivotal accident, though its true importance wasn't fully understood until years later, when other incidents would end up happening. It focused attention on the fact that the standard procedures for managing cockpit operations weren't just inadequate, they were potentially dangerous. So what's interesting is that, in 1977, so we're in 1972 with this crash, in 1977, just 4 years after, 2 Boeing 747 jumbo jets would collide on a runway.
In Tenerife,
killing 583 people in what still remains to this day the deadliest aviation incident in history. Go ahead and listen to that episode if you haven't. We have covered that. And just like Flight 401, the Tenerife disaster involved miscommunications in the cockpit and a breakdown in crew coordination. By the late 1970s, investigators had established that approximately 70% of airline crashes were due to human error rather than mechanical failure. So the Tenerife disaster and Flight 401 involved highly qualified crews. These captains with just tens of thousands of flight hours. In Tenerife, the pilot was literally on the magazine in the airplane, right? And instead of the second officer or, whoever else was in the cockpit questioning their decision-making, they just went along with it. And it had absolutely catastrophic consequences. Okay, in the months following the crash, something strange began happening on other Eastern Airlines flights. Crew members and passengers reported seeing lifelike apparitions of Flight 401's deceased crew, particularly Captain Bob and Flight Engineer Repo. Many of these ghost sightings occurred on aircraft that had been fitted with the salvaged parts from the original flight wreckage. Remember that the NTSB had allowed Eastern to reuse some of the undamaged components. This is a practice that was common at the time, but has been banned. Yeah, it's not permitted anymore. One flight attendant reported seeing Captain Bob sitting in first class. When she spoke to him, he vanished. On another flight, a captain saw what appeared to be Flight Engineer Repo in the forward gallery. When approached, the apparition said, "Watch out for fire on the airplane," before disappearing. Later, during pre-flight checks, engineers discovered an electrical problem that could have set off a fire. The ghost story spread quickly throughout Eastern Airlines and eventually to the public. A book titled The Ghost of Flight 401 was published in 1976 that documented a bunch of these supernatural claims. And the book suggested that the ghosts were benevolent spirits trying to protect passengers from further airline incidents and mishaps. Eastern Airlines officials responded to the ghost stories in complete denial, obviously, because you can't publicly say, yes, our planes are haunted. Come fly with us. However, I mean, that would be a great PR campaign in my opinion, but...
Which they might be.
They might be. There was enough concern that the airline removed all of Flight 401's salvaged parts from any aircraft in its fleet. Okay, this accident quite literally changed how pilots communicate in cockpits around the world. But, it really took Tenerife, in my opinion, to set in concrete the importance of talking back and standing up for your ideas when you're in a cockpit and, there's an idea floated that's like, oh, don't love that. That's not right protocol. So it is interesting that these two incidents happened only 4 years apart. Yeah, the 70s, man, they were wild. Okay, Zach, that is our story for today. It was a long one. You were very patient. We had some dog interruptions. I appreciate you. And if you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow us on Instagram at Final Boarding Call Pod. We are on Facebook. We've got email. You can feel free to email us. It's finalboardingcallpodcast@gmail.com. And join us next week where we will be talking about a crazy roller coaster gone terribly wrong. Until then, remember to stow your tray tables, fasten your seatbelts, and prepare for the unexpected, because not every trip reaches its final destination. Goodbye.